Welcome to the first racing news show of the new year. We wish all Teletrack viewers both a happy and prosperous 2018. Coming up in the show this week, we follow an inspirational story in which the combined knowledge of two forward-thinking horsemen in Michael Azzi and world-renowned bit expert Bommer come together to find an innovative solution to a problem facing the son of dual Group 1 winner and sire Hat-Trick. But first, let's go back to where the story started. In November 2016, Hat Pontano was imported into South Africa as a possible Triple Crown candidate. As a dual Group 1 winner in his homeland of Argentina, the pitch black and handsome grandson of Sunday Silence drew attention from far and wide. But his idiosyncrasies made him a challenge to train. Having been accustomed to racing on left-handed tracks in the Argentine, he preferred to work on the left lead or wrong leg. This despite his jockeys here trying to persuade him to switch leads for our right-handed tracks. Hat Pontano's willful temperament and frustration started to show as he grabbed hold of the bit on the one side and worked with his mouth open. And it didn't just end there, as he started to hang onto the rails. Hat Pontano's Argentinian race record of 2 Grade 1s from just 4 starts speaks for itself. But after a disappointing South African debut in September last year, the Azzi team called in an internationally regarded bit expert, Pete Nell.
In work, we saw that he was 100% sound horse, but his movement wasn't as straight as what we would have liked, was free in motion as what we would have liked. So every time we spoke to our jockeys, we got a bit of feedback that it was all sort of coming from the mouth.
Yes.
And then we ended up getting in contact with Bommer and speaking about bits and what type of bits we could do, because the horse was running in more than going straight.
Pete, or Bommer as he's known, came up with a new design of bit for Hat Pontano. With this bit on his bridle, the handsome end tire showed immediate improvement, galloping straight in his training at home, before stepping out to win the Grade 2 Piedmont Empress Palace Charity Mile on Saturday the 4th of November.
Social order, Hat Pontano, big payday, social order, French Navy.
Again, I must thank someone else, to a man called Bommer. Thank you, Bommer. You're a top-class man. And a lot more people should have more faith in this man and use him, because he's a world-class man as far as horse bits are concerned.
Tell me, what did Bommer do differently with regard to his bit?
He actually customizes your bits to fit that horse's mouth shape and mouth type, and if he watches them work and that, he gets more insight into what may help the horse or benefit the horse. So I think that customization of his bits is a huge advantage, but definitely do look at the bit scenario a lot differently than what I used to before.
This is an interesting story, as the forward thinking of two knowledgeable horsemen, Michael Azzi and Bommer, combined to find an innovative solution to an otherwise problematic situation. Experienced horsemen and women are always quick to say that in this sport, one never stops learning. So true. More after the break. We saw how something as simple as the correct bit made all the difference to a horse like Hat Pontano. Within the space of 7 weeks, Michael Azzi and Bommer turned this horse around from finishing last in a pinnacle plate to winning a R1 million Grade 2 event. So what is it that we need to know about bits and bitting? We went to find out. The bit is a tool of communication between horse and jockey. It's generally believed that it accounts for as much as 50% of a jockey's communication with a horse. When used with respect, it's a very effective means of persuading a thoroughbred 8 times bigger and heavier than the average jockey to do what is asked. But if a horse instead experiences discomfort or pain when pressure is brought to bear on the bit, communication breaks down, ultimately affecting its performance and result on the track. Bommer has been at the forefront of providing innovative solutions to bitting issues for the past 30 years. Bommer bits, as they are known in equine circles, are now international items used by horsemen and women worldwide. Bommer, what countries do you sell your bits to?
We do both America, North and South, Australia, New Zealand, the whole of Africa, Ireland, England, and the entire Europe. And we're working on Japan too, so almost everywhere except Russia.
What are the obvious outward signs of bit pressure in a horse?
A horse's balance point is its head. So if the head is in line and relaxed, the rest falls in. So it's overbit, it comes in. If it's in pain, it'll lift up or shake its head or stick its tongue out. So there are quite a few signs.
Where does a bit place pressure on a horse?
Michelle, all bits put pressure on the tongue. And the tongue, believe it or not, is the most sensitive organ there is in a horse's anatomy.
Are horses' mouths similar to humans in that no two are the same?
Correct. Michelle, every horse is different.
What are those variables in a mouth that makes them different?
There are so many, the formation of the bottom jaw, the thickness of the tongue, the palate, is it a low, flat palate, the jowls, how thick they are. And I also notice the thoroughbreds, their smile, what I call the smile, is from there to here, is becoming shorter, which now creates other problems.
Over time, Bommer has noticed significant developmental changes in the conformation of a thoroughbred's mouth and jaw.
I think the humans are trying to perfect and cosmetically make them more beautiful. And unbeknown, they're creating major problems.
And these problems are problems that you are starting to see manifesting in bit issues?
Yes, very, very much so.
Bommer has observed with some concern smaller muzzles, shorter mouths and narrower jaws, manifesting in the bars of a horse's mouth being closer together. This has a knock-on effect for bits and bitting horses correctly, something that until recently has gone by unnoticed. What are some of the more common issues in racing if you look at a thoroughbred racing when it comes to bitting?
I would say again the tongue. We go back, we see so many horses they tie-tongue them, and that is all due to the fact the horse is either trying to get the tongue away from the bit, where they stick a tongue out, stick it over, and then the worst one is, in fact, when the horse sucks back, and that restricts the breathing. So tongue tying is assisting the trainer, but it actually is not getting to the problem. If I can just state a fact, when I started as bitting, nearly 20 years ago, I think the ratio then was about 8 to 12% of horses were tongue sensitive. I can assure you right now it's 85%. It's turned right around.
Bommer, you tell me that a lot can be seen when horses jump out of the gates at the start of a race.
The first 30 to 40 meters of the race is where I think a high percentage of the energy is used. And you can see them coming out, the heads up in the air, shaking, running sideways. The fact is, a horse doesn't run faster, it just takes more ground. So what we need from the starting stalls, we need that horse to get its nose extended. Yes. And remember, a horse will only stride to the tip of its nose. So what we want is the horse to take more ground.
They need to actually move into that bridle, don't they?
Moving in for the jockey, but the most important thing, you must still remember, the balance point of a horse is its head. So we want the horse settled and set, the head. You will see some horses, as they run, they rotate their head. Each one has got his own thing. But if you watch carefully, and the horse, there's very little movement on the nose, that horse is running true and straight.
So you are wanting a horse to run into a contact in which it's comfortable?
Exactly.
So what was Het Puntano's problem?
His problem was relatively simple. He, in fact, didn't like any pressure. He didn't like pole pressure. He didn't like tongue pressure. He didn't like bar pressure. And the other thing was he also didn't like metal. So he was a very tense horse. So all we did was remove the pressure. I've got a philosophy which is pressure equals resistance and resistance equals control. So all we did was remove all that anxiety from him, and now he is what he is.
Tell me the bit that you actually used with him.
It was the first one ever. It is one of my Bommer blues, but I constructed it in a manner that there's no pole pressure. The bit goes in the mouth and it settles, and that doesn't move. So he's completely comfortable on the tongue. And I've even tried to eliminate as much of the rein pressure from him.
Bomber, traditionally, horses have always been backed using a snaffle bit in the bridle. But is that part of the problem today, in that not all horses suit snaffles?
Correct. I always relate it to a pair of shoes. You can't have one pair of shoes for everyone. Everyone is uniquely different. Same with the horses. The biggest thing is the mouth conformation. Yes. So that, whichever bit it is, it has different results on each horse due to conformation.
What have you seen happen as practice in the mornings in a racing yard with regard to bridles?
Oh, well, for instance, they normally have their first, second, third and fourth training, and when the first lot come back, that goes on to the bridle just gets transferred to a different horse. I think there's lots of room for improvement.
What would that improvement be? A bridle for each horse?
Definitely, and a bit accordingly for each horse.
What are some of the bitting solutions you've been able to offer racehorses in training?
Michelle, I think the biggest thing is the tongue relief. It seems to just come up all the time, going right back to Mike de Kock and Gray's Inn. And I made a bit for him, which a lot of trainers call the Mike de Kock bit. But it was just a butterfly to stop the horse putting his tongue over the bit.
Bomber, you're of the opinion that all thoroughbreds should run with a bit strap on their bits. Tell us about that.
Correct, Michelle. All that does is assist to balance the bit, stop it being pulled through, and if a horse is drifting, the jockey can correct it. Get some horses that don't like metal. They're very busy chomping on. Now that's a sign of anxiety. That's where you got to go to a bit which is non-metal. So there's so many, but it all gets back to one common denominator, the tongue. We have just launched a titanium range, which I think is going to help the racing industry immensely. And I'm hoping it's going to remove that anxiety of metal bits. We all know it's very light, and I'm very excited.
Bomber tells us that there are exciting developments, not only with the new medium of titanium, but also with biometrics. Technology, once thought the domain of human athletes, is now being modified to help assist and monitor equine athletes as well, and it doesn't end there.
Then the other thing is the orthodontics. Yes. Like when we go to a dentist, yes, he takes an impression. Yes. We're doing the same thing with horses, and you won't believe what it's telling us, because looking in the mouth, you can't see as much as when you've taken a mold. Working with someone in Australia, it's all on the testing grounds, but hopefully next year it'll be available to South Africa.
What is Bomber's take-home message?
I always say, when you get a new horse, let it run free, because that is what God gave it, and that is its natural movement. And I think you've got to work with that. And I've always said, with horses, let nature be your guideline, and stick as close to nature and what that horse does freely. All horses are natural animals of flight, so they know how to run, but they've got to be running free, and happy horses is what we strive for. One of our top trainers said to me once, the difference between walking to the winner's circle and the stable is 2%. And he related that 2% to a half in training, a half with your dentist, shoeing and chiros, half in your feed. And if he said to me, if you can give me a 0.5% on bitting, that's all I ask. And at that level, you only need that 2%. It's the difference between winning and losing.
That's a wrap for this week's show. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time on Sunday, the 21st of January, when we gear up for the running of the 2018 Sun Met. See you then.